Welcome everybody to the Compliance Alliance Power Half Hour. And today we're going to be doing a deeper dive on what goes into these higher premiums that we're all seeing in early education. And we could not ask for a better guest expert here, Samantha Phillips from Comploy Vertical Insurance Group. Hey, Samantha.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you for having me.
Well, you talk about this night and day and in your sleep without a doubt. And there's a lot of visibility about what's happening. Can we get coverage? Why are the premiums so high? So during this power half hour, we're going to bring to light what are some of the contributing factors. So we're going to start there and then we'll talk about, well, what can we do about it? So we can walk away with some hope, some key action items and takeaways. But if we start with the headlines can be very they make us very nervous when we see things about these massive increases in premiums, but we have to talk.
Absolutely.
We don't talk about it, we can't start understanding what our role is to impact that, change that. So let's just talk about the sticker shock of what are you seeing with increases in premiums? Let's get real about this.
Well, it's a very real subject for me because I'm literally the one having to relay, oh, we did everything we could, but your premium is increasing $15,000 more, $20,000 more, in some cases 50, 75. I think the worst one we had this year was a $102,000 increase over last year for one of our multi-site operators in Utah. It's They make for very, very painful, very uncomfortable conversations. Um, yeah, and I mean, it's across the board. So we're seeing even it's worse in states that are prone to catastrophic property loss because you're not only taking the liability increases that we're seeing from the market in general, but
Right.
also the property increases from wildfires. Think the wildfires in California. So any area that is desert land type or Montana, Arizona, Utah, California, very prone to wildfire risk. Hurricanes, tornadoes, all of your coastal states that face those hurricane risks, they're getting really a double whammy for the sticker shock of premium increases because it's not just liability rates that are increasing for them, it's the property rates that are increasing for them as well. And it's really uncomfortable. And for your programs that are not highly profitable, those numbers and that type of increase is not sustainable at all. And so if you don't know what's going on and you're not aware what's trending in the insurance market for early education, you're going to be really sticker shocked when you get that renewal bill and you're told that this is not only your only option, but you have to pay this in order to keep having insurance. That's difficult to stomach.
It sure is. And we're going to break that statement down into two different pieces. Like, what do you do if you find it's beyond what you're able to pay? How do you posture yourself for potential exit, preserving and protecting the value that you do have? We hate to think about that, but that's a reality. But before we go there, let's look at, you said things like if you're in an area that's prone to wildfires or floods or things of that nature, those are things out of our control. You and I've talked off camera about managing what's in your control and what's outside of your control. So can you give the examples of what is within your control that you really want to stay on top of?
Yeah, well, and even when it comes to some of the property risk too, there are some things you can do. I love oh my gosh, who was it? Crystal in Georgia. I think she's one of your Compliance Alliance allies. But they had a hurricane approaching one time and she was like, what are things that we can do to help protect our building? And they went out and they got sandbags and did all kinds of stuff to try and protect their facility from what they thought was impending doom. But there are things that you can do, and with flooding, obviously, creating some type of barrier if it's within your means and you have the resources to do something like that. When it comes to wildfires, having a 10-foot clearance around your building where there's not any debris, there's not dry brush or landscaping that would catch whatever fire embers are might be floating around. But when it comes to liability, there's a lot more that you can do to try and control to control that impact. So biggest one right now is compliance. Licensing compliance is that is the number one declination that I see, and I see it every single day for clients that I'm working on and people that are approaching me saying they haven't had insurance for a month, 3 months, 6 months because none of the agents they've reached out to have been able to find them coverage. Licensing compliance is a huge factor because it's what underwriters are using to determine if these childcare providers are risky or not. How you maintain compliance, what types of citations. I mean, if you're getting citations for background checks or improper ratio or negligent supervision, you've got to think of it from a the insurer's standpoint. Like we want them to insure this operation, even though they have a track record of not of allowing adults to have access to children before their background check has come back. That is it's risky on the insurer's part. Same with neglectful supervision or improper ratio. All of that plays a really key factor in what the liability rates offered are, but it's all 100% controllable.
Yes, yes. I'm really glad that you said that. As you know, the Compliance Alliance, our name, but compliance is typically a word that people shy away from. Compliance and audits are the two things that make people think, alarm. I don't want to be audited if I'm out of compliance. But I think what's happening in the industry, we're being forced to embrace this as a topic we can get more comfortable talking about. Other industries talk about it all the time, whether you're in healthcare, you're in medical, where else? Transportation. You think about all the things that we do to remain compliant. So that's my goal and vision, that we'll get comfortable having these conversations. And you're pointing to the fact we really can't
It's
afford not.
necessary. Yeah, it's absolutely necessary.
Right. So these things happen, and we're going to talk a little bit about documentation. So I'll kind of set this up from what we see. At the Compliance Alliance, we often will help do licensing history audits. Looking at the past 3 years, what types of audits, citations have you had? What was the outcome? Was there any type of probation, corrective action? And these things happen. We're dealing with little humans, we're dealing with people, things can happen, but it's how well we've managed that risk. So every licensing visit comes with it a type of risk, high, medium, low, and the number depending upon how people score. But when we look at that from an insurance perspective, let's talk about documentation. We sometimes think we'll get to it. I'll file that later. I'll make note of it. Can you share a bit of what you see of the power of documentation and maybe some examples?
Yeah, so right now the best and I don't want to say that insurance is affordable for anybody right now because it's not. But our best outcome and the most positive success stories that we have in helping clients secure insurance is from the people that have very strong SOPs. Their licensing compliance record, they work with programs that they're not using binders or paper checklists that have a tendency to not be followed or held accountable as much. And that really has an impact on what we can prove and what we can't prove.
Right.
You talk all the time about best intention versus best practice. And when it comes to helping you help yourself find the best insurance quotes or even keep what you've already got, being able to provide checklist to show the insurance companies that these are all the steps that you're taking. This is the checklist that the teacher has to follow on the playground. Oh my gosh, playground checklist is so incredibly important, and making sure that compliance is maintained there because the playground is probably the single most high occurrence for bodily injury claims when it comes to children. So insurance companies are really on edge when it comes to playground safety, keeping the fall zone surfacing up to date, If it's wood chips that run off, where I don't know where they go, but they always run off. But keeping that filled regularly and, being able to show just something as simple as that. We have wood chips, but we're on a proactive schedule where that is refilled every 3 months or every 6 months. Being able to show that that is a documented process for you paints a very different picture than if we are just saying, oh, this provider has been in business for 20 years and they do all the right things and trust us, take our word for it.
Right.
That's not as powerful of a narrative as it is when we say the same thing, but here are their standard operating procedures. Here's a copy of their employee handbook. Here's the parent handbook. And by the way, these are the proactive checklists that teachers, directors, these are what they follow on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. It's a lot of information, it's a lot of work, but right now that's what insurance companies are looking for in determining, what, this is a good risk. We feel comfortable insuring this program because they run a tight ship.
Right. We call that the compliance trifecta. So it's the standard operating procedures, it's the checklist, and it's the audit. And any one of those is valuable, but when you put it all together, so your standard operating procedures aren't intentions, like this is how we expect it to be done. Your checklist is, this is the method by which we're conducting or completing the procedure. And then we're auditing to make sure that it's done on whatever frequency it needs to be done. Supervision
Your
is
accountability. Yeah, I love that.
100% accountability. And this is a great segue to talk about controlling the narrative. Some people haven't heard you talk about this, but this is where we're going to lean in for the last part of our time because it's the one thing we have complete control over. What is controlling the narrative? What does it look like and how do you do it?
Yeah, so I feel like I could talk about this in my sleep because I've taught about it for so long now. Controlling the narrative is the provider being proactive in, you know what, we're going to address the 6 main areas that insurance companies are looking at and have concerns over. Areas like management, facility maintenance, licensing compliance, protection. What types of things do you have regarding your facility that's keeping your employees, the premises, and those children in your care safe? So the purpose of the narrative is, think of it like a real estate listing, right? So when a real estate agent wants to sell a property, they're going to bring in a photographer, open all the windows, have the carpet vacuum so it has the pretty little lines on the carpet. Everything is neat and tidy and put in its place. Beautiful photos that entice you to want to see that property. But then they also choose very carefully selected words that describe the property. And the whole purpose of that is to make you want to see it or want to buy it just from the way that the listing is worded and the pictures that go along with it. That's what we want to do with the narrative. We want to entice insurance companies to want to insure you based on the information we're providing to overcome their concerns up front, and also let them see by providing pictures that your facility is in great shape, it's well maintained, you have strong operating procedures, you have checklists, you're doing all the right things that the insurance applications don't do a good job of capturing. And when it comes to things like licensing citations, controlling the narrative is more important than ever because it gives you a space to tell your side of the story. There's what the insurance companies can see when they look at your public inspection reports. Not all states give a place for your response to be seen, or it might show corrective action, but it doesn't give the full story.
Right.
So being able to create what I call the child care insurance narrative gives you a space to do that. You're owning whatever violations they are, but you're also talking about, this is how we keep them from happening again. What remedial action was taken? Same with your claims history. If you've been unfortunate enough to have either a liability lawsuit or property damage, how you confront those circumstances and talk about, you know what, it happened, but this is what we learned from that experience. This is what we've implemented since then so that it doesn't happen again. You know, we've installed water leak detection sensors if you had a water damage claim. So now you're notified earlier, you can shut off the water and prevent a really large loss. Licensing violations, you know, you got together with the entire team, even though it was only an isolated incident in a classroom involving one teacher, you retrained your entire staff on that one incident so they could all learn from that experience and not make the same mistake. Maybe you implemented a new process in your onboarding so that that doesn't happen again. It tells a very different story. It tells a better story about your program and how you're operating than if we were to just let the insurance company review your inspection reports and think worst case scenario when
Yes.
left to their own devices.
That is so great because controlling the narrative in that sense, when I think about things happen, like we said, citation, a loss of some sort. I've seen this myself. We tend to only talk about our 100% inspections on social media, right? And we both have close friends in the industry where things happen and getting more comfortable to talk about, okay, this happened, but just like you said, we call it risk management or risk mitigation. And what are the things that we can do to talk about this happened? This is how we handled it. This is what we're going to do to prevent it in the future. This is how we're auditing to make sure that new procedures are being followed. That is such a powerful story to say we're on top of our game. And the other place that I see it, and maybe you have some parallels for insurance, the other place that I see it is if I'm buying a school, that narrative, if I'm expanding that narrative, I want to be able to see that for the type of school that I'm acquiring.
Mhm.
Too often we see where schools are acquired and then they say, ooh, we didn't know about that. Well, they may have known superficially, but the layers beneath. So I think the other benefit of controlling the narrative, not just for insurance purposes, although that's the primary use of what we're talking about today, but it is a phenomenal tool to say, what's your benchmark of success? What's your non-negotiables? What's the standard against which you're going to be evaluating other schools? And or if you're preparing to exit, what a beautiful package to somebody that might be acquiring your school. Are there parallels to that with insurance or comments about that?
To add that in my next presentation as an example for something that the narrative can be used for. I have a lot of people that, you know, if you're creating this document, and I mean, I have had some people that get very, very elaborate. I mean, 21 to 24 page narratives, which my template is nowhere near that long. But it's great. It makes a beautiful pamphlet, and I've had a lot of people that when taking the time to put this together, will turn around and use it as a handout for parents. Because if the insurance companies find valuable what steps you're taking to maintain the facility, to protect the children, to what training your staff goes through, how much more valuable would a parent find that when it comes to enrolling their child in your program? They
Yeah.
are also going to want to see that you value some of the same things that they do. And then I've also had a couple of clients that will provide it when they're considering refinancing or expanding their operation. They'll use the narrative to help with the lending process.
Outstanding. So your template, tell us about that. It's not necessarily 21 pages, although one could expand to that because our listeners are going to have access to your controlling the narrative template. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's basically a done for you guide that you can, it's plug and play, right? It's a fillable PDF. The first half of it, I think like page 1 through 8 gives you guiding questions to get you thinking from a risk management standpoint. What would be valuable in sharing? What should I include on this? And then the second half provides fillable pages for you. Each section has a title on what would to make sure that we covered the 6 key areas. There are picture upload templates where you can upload photos of your team. You can talk about how long you've been in the business, what the tenure of your team is. That's really important. If you're involved in any industry associations, and you literally just download it and type right into it. Same, there's a picture template for you to upload photos of your facility. You want to make sure they are the best pictures of your facility. Don't upload a picture of your kitchen with a knife on the counter. Remember, again, we want to use this for insurance purposes. But I recognize that not everybody has the capacity to be able to create something from scratch. And it can be a very overwhelming process too. So the purpose of the template, the guiding questions, is really a resource to be able to help providers create something without reinventing the wheel, specifically designed to touch on the areas that insurance companies find concerning so that they can be proactive, they can help themselves. You literally fill it out and send it to your agent, and they'll do the rest. But if you not every agent knows what is going on with the insurance market facing providers. So I guarantee you, if you complete this template and send it to them, they will use it to help you. But if you don't create it and they don't know to ask the right questions or pull this information out of you, well, then you're shooting yourself in the foot by not doing the work to put it together.
And potentially facing a declination because of something that you could have told the story about when
Yes.
you submitted your application. So that's going to be a download as folks are listening to this, that they'll be able to download it. My other piece of advice on this is update it regularly, even if you were only doing it for your renewal. But when you're doing new things, or like, wow, we should really include that in our narrative, whether it's for growth or for financing or all the other reasons that you've talked about, or for your families. Make it a living and breathing document, not something you do once.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, it's much easier to maintain that way.
yes, it is. Yes, it is. So I've been trying to control myself at the very end of this, because I've been part of a little secret that I know by the time this airs, it will be more public knowledge. But what have you been up to that we can share with our listeners?
I have been writing a book, and very happy to announce that it'll be available for purchase soon. But it is called the Child Care Insurance Playbook: A Guide to Protecting Your Early Education Business. And it's definitely a labor of love. It will talk about the 10 main coverages that every early education owner needs to protect their businesses. There's a chapter on controlling the narrative and the importance of that. There's some chapters on how to structure your policies to help further eliminate your risk. Lots of great information. I have a section called Mythbusters Edition, where I break some of the myths in the industry, like, oh, licensing tells me what I need. And yeah, no, that's not the case. They tell you what they require. That's not necessarily all that you need. But the feedback has been really great so far from my beta reviewers. As you know, you were one of them. And just curious to know if you have any feedback you'd like to share, knowing what content is in the book.
Yeah, it's a great, easy read. And for those of you that know Samantha, Sam brings the sparkly persona to a very dry subject. I'm sorry if I have to say that, but compliance,
It is.
two things that people are like, okay, wait, can't we talk about the enrollment or the more sexy parts of early
Mhm.
education? But you bring humor, you bring your personality, but also real practical takeaways to a topic that is overwhelming. Like sometimes I'm like, I'll get to that, and I push it aside. But you made it very consumable and relatable for an early education leader to say, all right, now I know what questions to ask. I might not know the answers, but I now know what questions I should be asking and what I should be thinking about to advocate for myself. So this is a must read. I kind of look at it as there's lots of content that we can read that's in the industry, but this is something you're going to keep, on your desk or readily available that you can refer back to, because it's not a one and done. You will face different situations in your journey as an early education owner. And Samantha's got a great resource with this book. I can't wait to get my hands on the physical copy. So a signed one. I want a signed one.
We'll make sure we run into each other, so I'll make sure that I sign it. I'm very excited, and it'll be in a pink sparkly pen too.
Of course it will be. All right, Samantha, well, thank you. And I know our audience has really been able to come away with some key takeaways. Be proactive. Don't be uncomfortable having the conversation about anything in your past that needs to be brought to light. Control the narrative, use the tools and your best practices to put your school in the best light possible. So thank you, Samantha. We look forward to seeing your book and seeing you out on the road.
Thank you so much for having me.